Hello everyone, welcome back to Yuno Learning. So in today's webinar, we are going to discuss another recent IELTS Writing Task 1. We're going to break down the assessment criteria that the examiner are looking for you while you are attempting your exam and what exactly do you all need to cover within this specific writing task so that you can also score your desired band score in IELTS. So let's begin with the different types of IELTS essay there are. So there are different categories of IELTS essay you might come across. Now, even though the instruction might be same, there are different ways you can go about attempting it. For example, let's say the discussion is about one very general topic. We'll take, let's say, paper books versus ebooks. So traditionally, reading is done through paper books, but recently, since the introduction of Kindle, we do also have ebooks, right? Now, let's say the question have to first discuss both ideas about the argument. We'll support paper books and yes, paper books are beneficial in this manner. And then we'll talk about ebooks. And if the question says also give your opinion, in that case, we'll have a paragraph depending upon the opinion about your view on this particular matter. If the instruction is just give your opinion, which is better, paper books or ebooks, then you can simply go ahead and choose your opinion. You think paper books are better or ebooks are better, and thus for give the opinion. If it is a advantage, disadvantage essay, then you might be asked to discuss the advantages of paper book over ebooks or vice versa. But within these questions, if the instruction changes, the idea of how you're going to approach this essay also changes. For example, if I say advantage and disadvantage, let's say we're going to talk about advantages and disadvantages of ebooks over paper books. So first we have to discuss two advantages and two disadvantages in this question. But if the question says advantages or disadvantages, in that case, you can choose either advantage or disadvantage. But if the question is, do the advantages outweigh, disadvantages? In that particular case, we are going to have a ratio of 2:1. What do we mean by that? We're going to side with one, that the disadvantages are more, but there is one advantage. And then we'll conclude that no, the advantages do not outweigh disadvantages. So you can see how just depending upon the changes of instruction, the entire essay is taking form in a different way. Your paragraphs change, your number of paragraphs, in which paragraph you write what will change according to the instruction. That is why it is very, very important for you to familiarize yourself with the different types of IELTS essay that IELTS has been conducted over the years and approach that is required for each one of them. Now, the question that we have here was asked on 10th of February 2024 this year. Now, what is the question? Ecotourism often involves visiting remote and fragile ecosystems, which raises concerns about the impact on local cultures and indigenous communities. Now, we're talking about ecotourism, which is basically an activity wherein you go to very preserved, or let's say local cultures which are fragile, which have fragile ecosystems. What do you mean by fragile? Delicate ecosystems. That just because of a minor change, the entire community or the entire working of the ecosystem might change. Now, these kind of visits are often encouraged during ecotourism. Now, what do you think? What problems can this cause, and how can these problems be resolved? Now, see, first I'll underscore the category of this essay, which is a problem solution essay. That means we're supposed to discuss the problems with this particular era, and then the solutions that are that can be offered regarding this. So when we're talking about problems, we have to, and we're giving solutions. Both of them have to be synced. What do I mean by synced? That if I'm talking about a problem, a particular problem, the solution has to be in regards to that. For example, let's take another example of an essay, global warming. We can take example that people are using so many cars these days, right? So we can say, what are the problems with using so many cars? So we can talk about global warming, one of the factor, right? Now, how do I give the solution to this? Should be synced. If I talk about that cars emit CO2, then we can talk about filters. These filters that you can install in your cars, which some sort of filter some sort of the impurities that are thrusted back into the environment. So this is what I'm talking about. So whenever we are talking about a problem, the solution has to be within its ambit. The solution has to be the problem that you've talked about. It cannot be something else. For example, I talk about here CO2, that it leads to emission of harmful gases. And then the solution I'm giving is we should cut down on, let's say, we should increase the price of the cars. Now, there's no problem with this solution, but the only problem is there is a lack of cohesiveness within your problem and solution. All right. So how are we going to attempt this question? Number one, understand the given statement. So now we're going to deconstruct this statement word by word. First word is ecotourism. What do we mean by ecotourism? When we visit remote and fragile ecosystems, delicate ecosystems, which raises concerns about the impact. So impact on what exactly, right? So it is also important for you to deconstruct that if we're talking about ecotourism, then what exactly is the question asking us? We're talking about the impact on local cultures and indigenous communities. What do we mean by indigenous communities? The communities that reside there that are specific to those areas, indigenous people, right? Now, understand the instruction. Now, we have understood this. We're going to talk about the problems and the solution. Now, since the question says problems, there has to be minimum of 2 problems. Do not end your essay with 1 problem when the instruction is clearly asking you more than 1 problem with this. And then we'll generate content. So given upon your idea of how you're going to attempt this, you can create your own set of problems and solutions that you're going to give for it. So let's see what is the sample answer that we have prepared for you. Number 1, introduction. Now, how does the introduction work? We'll start with paraphrasing. What do we mean by paraphrasing? So when we paraphrase, we basically rewrite the question in our own words, so that when we are, let's say the examiner is reading it, they don't have to go back to the question and read it. They're very clear on the idea that what this essay is about. That is the motive of paraphrasing. Then we can add in the pointers if you wish to briefly. What are you going to talk about, right? What problems are we going to discuss, and what are the solutions that you're going to offer in this particular essay? And very important thesis statement. This is something you cannot miss on. Whatever the question is given to you, let's say the question was, what is your opinion? So you clearly state your opinion. In the previous essays, in the webinars, we have discussed how opinion is supposed to be stated. For this particular question, state what are the problems briefly and answer the question that is given to you. So let's see. Number 1, the growth in tourism has led to rising popularity of ecotourism. Now, instead of starting directly with ecotourism, we paraphrased it by getting into this background statement, which entails visiting isolated and delicate habitats. Now, you see how we are talking about remote. Remote means isolated. So we used a synonym for it. Instead of just repeating and copy pasting what we were given, we showed the examiner we have the capability to rephrase and paraphrase whatever we're trying to express in our own words. Delicate. Fragile means delicate. Habitats, ecosystems. So this is how you can change the words and sentence structure to bring in your, paraphrasing. Then giving rise to worries over adverse effects. Now, instead of saying the impact, we said adverse effects. Adverse means bad effects on the indigenous people and their local customs. Instead of saying local cultures, we went with local customs. So this is how you paraphrase your question. Now, cultural disturbance and displacement of indigenous people are some of the major problems. Now, see, we were supposed to answer this question. Here is how we have answered this. So number 1, cultural disturbance. Number 2, displacement of indigenous people. What do we mean by displacement? Means that people might have to move because of the problems that we are causing, right? Then, however, the risk can be reduced through appropriate legal regulations and educating visitors. So these are the solutions that we are going to talk about. Now, after reading this introduction, your examiner will not have any how or what in their mind. What do I mean by this? That when the examiner is reading this question, the examiner is very clear on the question that we're talking about, what is this essay is about, and the examiner is also clear on what exactly are you going to talk about and what are the solutions that you're offering. So this is how a brief introduction is supposed to be. You can write it about in 45 to 50 words. That is the optimal limit. Around 40 to 50, that is something that a good introduction should be around, or maybe less. But this is do not exceed more than 50 words, because then your essay will be too wordy, and which is what we next. First paragraph, we'll talk about the problems. So the first paragraph is only supposed to be about problems. You cannot write a problem and then a solution and then second paragraph and a problem. No. First paragraph only dedicated to problems and then solution. So see how we have written this. We'll start with our topical statement, topic statement, which basically means that what is this paragraph about? So this paragraph is about problems. So briefly give opening statement that this is the problem that we're going to talk about. Then we have to explain those as well. It's important for you to explain them. And then example. Very, very important. You cannot just simply throw in pointers around. You have to give us you have to develop the idea that you're talking about. So number one, ecotourism, despite its good intentions, can contribute to the loss of cultural identity and displacement of indigenous people. So this gives me the idea that in this paragraph, we're only going to talk about these two factors, which are the problems that are associated with ecotourism. The surge in number of visitors can lead to alterations in their culture, traditions, rituals, and values to meet the expectations of the tourists, which eventually dilutes their cultural heritage. So you might have seen this phenomena when a lot of people place changes to a tourist place. A lot of things are changed. A lot of things are changed to accommodate the tourists around. Now, this will eventually lead to the dilution of their cultural heritage, their own practices. Now, this could also stem from the judgment or infeasibility to like our custom is not feasible for the tourists. So this might happen because of those reasons, but this is what the problem is entailing. So you have to develop it sufficiently so that examiner does not ask you again that is this a valid point? Then additionally, infrastructure development to support tourism, such as hotels and roads, can infringe upon untouched regions, displacing indigenous communities from their ancestral lands, as is evident in the construction of resorts in several parts of the country where ecotourism is flourishing. You see, as is evident, this is one example that we have seen that a lot of places where, especially in hill stations, if you're in India, you have seen in hill stations how construction of resorts is associated with people leaving their places because a lot of time people don't own that land, but it is their ancestral land. And then when we construct resorts, they have to be moved and then thus forth displacing indigenous communities from their places. So any point that you have stated has to be thoroughly developed and answered throughout the paragraph so that it just does not sound like you have just said something without actually proving it. Next. Now let's come to the solutions. Okay. So mitigating the negative impacts of ecotourism requires a robust legal framework and proactive measures by visitors. Now, this is a topic statement that what is this paragraph going to be about? We're talking about the solutions, which are a legal framework and a proactive measures by the visitors. So we have started off with an example. For instance, laws regulating visitor behavior, land use, and protection of culture can help preserve sensitive areas. Further, another point to develop an idea, since we did not develop it enough. Further, implementing visitor education programs can raise awareness about responsible tourism practices and respect for varied cultures. Also, displacement can be avoided by respecting their land rights, consulting them on development projects, which is a solution, ensuring their participation in decision making processes. It also includes implementing policies that prioritize their well being and protection, such as providing legal recognition of their land, ownership, and ensuring fair compensation. So, ensuring fair compensation could also be a way. So, this is how we have developed on the solutions that we have talked about, how to build this robust legal framework when we include them in the decision making process and when we tell visitors that these are the things that you have to abide by, that you cannot go ahead and disrupt this particular area because this is a indigenous preserved land and you cannot do these kinds of activities in this particular area. So these are the ways you can go ahead and protect it. So see, let's have a check pointer. Do we have a topic sentence in this particular paragraph? Yes, we do. Our first sentence is a topic sentence. Did we explain our idea? We did when we mentioned further, and these were the explanations. Did we give an example? Yes, we mentioned an example, for instance. So all three things are covered in this particular essay. We've added linkers, which will be talked about after in the last slide. But yes, this is basically the structure that we're going to talk about. Now, are these solutions relevant to what the problems we talked about? Yes, we talked about displacement and how can that be avoided by including them in legal framework. So these problems and solutions are synced and thus forth it makes a more cohesive essay. Okay, let's move on quickly to our last concluding paragraph. Now, before I start with the concluding paragraph, something of very importance in conclusion, one thing that you have to remember is no, just a minute, no new points. Now, what do I mean by this? That so you've already talked about the problems and solutions. Now that let's say suddenly by the end of the essay you remember one more solution. Oh, one more problem that is associated with. So let's just add it in the conclusion. No, you cannot do that because the conclusion is supposed to wrap up your ideas of what we have already talked about. So in that particular case, you cannot add something new because there was no time for you to develop it. So no new points in the conclusion. And when we're writing the conclusion, you can simply paraphrase whatever you've written in the introduction. So to conclude, although ecotourism helps in ecological conservation, it leads to diminished cultural identity and disrupts the natural habitat. This is what we talked about. We have again paraphrased it. Instead of just simply writing diluting, we have mentioned diminished, another synonym. Of the human population in the region, precautionary measures and strict regulations can help reduce the damage, fostering a harmonious relationship between tourism and the ecosystem. So, see how, even though this conclusion is saying the same thing that we started off in the introduction, it is completely paraphrased. We have not repeated similar phrases or sentences. That is very, very important. So, remember always paraphrase in your conclusion. Repetition is very heavily frowned upon in your IELTS exam. That means you do not have sufficient tools for you to express your ideas. Until and unless it is necessary, you cannot find any other synonym apt for this particular word, or you do not know the exact meaning of the synonym, then you can go ahead and use it. But otherwise, make sure that you have large repository of words so that you can replace each and every word. All right, so this is the final essay. Let's have a complete discussion. We start off with the introduction. These are our problems, our solutions, which are synced, and conclusion. So this is what the essay asks us about. Talk about the problems and the solutions. So when we are talking about task response, we have cleared it. We have made sure that our problems are synced. Our essay is completely relevant to what they were asking about. The impact, not on environment or anything else, but the impact on the communities itself. So the problems are completely in sync with the question, right? This is why I emphasized in the beginning that what is this impacting? So read the question 5 to 10 times if you have to. So you make sure that your essay is completely on track to what the examiner is asking you to do. Next, coherence and cohesion. In here, we talk about how related, how cohesive narrative that we are making, that one thing is related to the another. So that is where syncing in your problems and solution comes in. But also you can make your essay more cohesive by adding some linkers. Now, what do those linkers look like? For example, additionally, then we had, for instance, here, further, also. These are all the linkers you can add to conclude so that you can tell this to conclusion. So these kind of linkers you can add in your essays to add that cohesion while you are giving your ideas. Next, we talk about lexical resource. Lexical resource is nothing but a fancy way of saying your vocabulary. So vocabulary, how can we improve on that? By using synonyms, right? For example, how we talked about the word entails. Instead of writing remote, we wrote isolated, delicate habitats. And in the last, when we talked about cultural disturbance and displacement of indigenous people, we mentioned his diminished cultural identity and disrupts the natural habitat. So see how with every time we have mentioned the same thing, we have tried to change it. If you cannot find a different word, try to change the part of speech it comes from, right? For example, disturbance, it's a noun, right? Instead of using it as a noun, I can also use it as a verb, disturbing the cultural balance. So see how you can change the part of speech of the word to paraphrase sometimes if you are out of synonyms in your vocabulary. Then other words could be like adverse effects, right? Or uh, then legal regulations. Here we talked about strict regulations. How every time we're using a word, we're trying to change as much as possible. Then other words like indigenous people. Then the surge. Surge means increase. So instead of writing increase, a better word for that. Alterations in their culture, then dilutes, that means diminishes, where here you mentioned diminished. Then infringe, that means inflict, right? May cause. ancestral lands. So all these words are also very key words, right? When we're talking about this indigenous people, ancestral land is a very specific word. If we're talking about tourism, then words which are very like culture, tradition, and rituals, these are very key words that you can use in these essays. So if you use these words, which will increase your uh, chances to get a higher score. Then robust, proactive measures. These are collocations, proactive measures, right? Robust legal framework. Now, what is a collocation? A collocation is basically two words that go together very well. For example, strictly forbidden, right? Not strongly forbidden, but strictly forbidden. So these are two words like which go very well together. So if you learn collocations, you can learn more words which go very well together. For example, proactive measures, right? Then all right. So these are the different words that we have talked about. Last but not the least, let me just clear this. Grammatical range and accuracy. Now, if I talk about accuracy, your tenses have to be correct. Your punctuation has to be correct. Why do you put your comma is very, very important. Your full stops are important. If you're starting the sentence with a capital letter, that is important. If your proper nouns are starting with the capital letter, that is also very important. Other than that, everything should be in small letters. So these are the kind of rules that you have to remember. Revise your grammatical rules if you have forgotten any. Make sure that you use your commas the correct way. But what do we mean by grammatical range? When I say range, that means you're supposed to use kinds of different sentences in your essay so that you can show the examiner that you can use it. For example, this sentence, cultural disturbance and displacement of indigenous people are some of the major problems. Now we tried to use it with a semicolon and write, however, the risk can be reduced through appropriate legal restrictions, right? So this is how we have, instead of using a simple sentence, we have added a semicolon to make a compound sentence of this sort and make sure that we show the examiner that we can use different kinds of sentences. More on, for example, ecotourism, then we added a dependent clause in between, can contribute to the loss of this. Then yes, this. To conclude, although another dependent clause, it leads to diminished culture and habitat innovation. Independent clause. So see how we're changing the sentence structures within places so that we can show the examiner we know how to use multiple kinds of we have a hold over the range of sentences within English, right? Now, these are the things that you had to focus upon. Now, when we are talking about the word limit, now your essay is supposed to be 250 words at least. You cannot write less than that. But the optimal limit that we suggest is around 280 to 290. You can make sure that you write around this words. Do not write more than 300 words because then it will be too wordy and there's no point if your point is not coming across. It has to be concise and your ideas have to come across in a very structured manner. So make sure you follow the structure. It will help you organize your ideas and plan your essay before you start writing so that you're not just going on the get go, whatever you're thinking of, and you're writing it down, because then you'll lack the cohesiveness. Cohesiveness only comes when there's a clear cut plan in your head that what are you going to talk about, what are the problems, and then what solutions am I going to offer. So now these are the things that you have to keep in mind while writing your essay. That's all for today. Thank you so much for joining. For more such interactive IELTS sessions and content, please follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube channel. And if there's anything you feel like you want us to add in our next upcoming session, please go ahead and comment below in the comment section. We'll be more than happy to bring it for you. And if you're looking for more IELTS resources, more sample answers that we have carefully crafted for you on our website, please visit www.yunolearning.com. You can also find crash courses or comprehensive courses. If you feel like you need more foundational you have more foundational issues with your grammar, you can go ahead and enroll in our foundational courses as well. All the details are mentioned at this website. Go ahead. Thank you so much for joining. See you in the next session.